Hey everyone, Phobos here, coming at you with another build guide, and today it's going to be the Incinerate Totem Ascendant, using Soul Mantle right here in the Kikazaru setup. Now this is a build my friend had been playing around with a bit. We had always done Incinerate Totem in the past. We actually did a build quite a few patches ago that used Ignites with the Ember Wake when that was still a thing, and it basically stacked a ton of Ignites and did a massive amount of single target damage. We were trying to see if Incinerate was good again this patch, because after they nerfed the Ember Wake, Incinerate was a pretty terrible skill because it has no crit, and it just can't be used with Spell Echo, even self-cast, or it could never be used on a totem anyway. And I believe the damage got nerfed in general at some point, so it was just a very mediocre skill. But we decided to try it again, and well, me specifically, I wanted to try and execute the build, and the idea was that since Incinerate hits fast, it would be a decent candidate for the leech you get from Scion, particularly the Chieftain. So that's what this build is about, and that's why we go Ascendant. Now, I'm probably going to be trying to cover a bunch of variations of this. I'll explain the Scion one first, but there's also a Hierophant one, and you can do Chieftain. You could even do Inquisitor, really, now that Incinerate has crit, but I think the most appealing two are the Hierophant and Ascendant, like we have here. So I guess I'll just go into the links first. So we got Controlled Destruction, Faster Casting, Incinerate, Conk Effect, which you just swap out with Increased AoE. I don't have it in my thing right now. Combustion and Immolate. Now, because you want to be able to use Combustion, like because these are both strong gems, Immolate and Combustion, you tend to use them together because that's how you get your Ignites up, is with Combustion, and then you can use, obviously, Immolate takes effect when the mob is burning. Now, the problem with using Elemental Focus is if you put Elemental Focus in either one of these, you're losing an effect, right? So if you put it in place of Immolate, you're losing the 19%, minus 19% fire resistance, unless you have some other way to ignite, which you could do, but it's just not a consistent option. And if you put it in place of Combustion, then you can't use Immolate unless you have like a Searing Bond totem or something. So, I mean, you can make it work, but it's just a little bit more of a hassle. Searing Bond, I guess, isn't that bad if you have like 4 or some totems, because you're going to have a bunch of kind of little lines going everywhere, but I think it's just kind of like an extra totem you need to cast. It's not really necessary. So the quality of life is better with this setup. For the Golem, we use Lightning Golem. Obviously, just Incinerate is really good with cast speed, because it helps, like, in cast speed obviously increases the damage of the skill, and it helps you ramp faster. And we've got a Shield Charge set up in the Scepter. This is a pretty decent Scepter. I think this is like Omnitech Scepter because it has the added chaos to spells, but you know, nothing super insane here. It has a lot of fire res on it, but you can kind of finagle that by just getting like better gear on other things. So yeah, using a Devoto's Devotion. Now this is like, I'm not really sure if this is what you want to use. It actually turned out a lot better than I expected. The attack speed is really good. Chaos damage is really good this league, or chaos resistance. The movement speed is never hurts, and it gives you a ton of dex. The only thing is this build is essentially kind of hybrid, and it takes away kind of a lot of potential ES for the Helm slot, and you're also missing out on a high life roll. So you can use like a Star Conjures in place of this if you want more life, but I think that overall this is a pretty good option. Helps you go really fast at least. But yeah, I mean, you can pretty much replace this with anything, and obviously if you replace it with a more traditional helm, it becomes a lot easier to work around your resistances, especially when you're using like a full damage shield like this. But yeah, this is like 20 chaos, I think. It's probably like 5 chaos, 10 chaos, 3 chaos, 3 to 5 chaos. These are like 1 chaos basically. The gloves are not very expensive at all, probably a couple chaos, maybe 5 at most. The belt is kind of expensive because I got chaos on it, but you don't need chaos to start, especially if you're already using this. These are cheap as fuck, and they're actually really insane for this build because, again, cast speed do more damage, and you just have onslaught all the time, so the movement speed and attack speed to help you shield charge. Like, if you notice, like, you go like a madman with this build, and we're not even using Brightbeak. It's pretty insane. So that's good. Yeah, and the shield's expensive. Well, I got it kind of cheap. I got it for like 40, I think, but it could potentially be really expensive. You don't need as good of a shield as this, though. You can kind of make do with whatever. In fact, this shield actually, in some ways, is kind of difficult to use because it doesn't have any res or anything like that. But yeah, that's basically the gear breakdown. And I gave you the links already. So let's open it. We can go over the flask really quick. So typically if it's a life build, I like to have at least one life flask. This is not even the right one. Like typically I like to use either a catalyzed Eternal of Staunching or a Seething Divine life flask of Staunching. And it just sort of depends on the character and how I feel the damage on the character is going to be taken. Typically for totem characters, I like to use more of a Seething type setup. But a catalyzed Eternal would work well as well. Then a Basalt Flask, a Experimenter's Quicksilver. You can also just use the charge recovery on here, is probably theoretically better, or reduced charges used, but I just happen to have this one. Wise Oak, and Diamond Flask, obviously, because now Incinerate can crit. So Flask setup is pretty intuitive. I wouldn't really change much there. And let's get into the... Well, actually, I'll go over a couple more things. So yeah, we have an Orb of Storm set up. This is actually just to generate... what do you call it? Power charges. Because you actually get Arcane Surge just from attacking things with the Ascendant node, as you'll see here. Gain Arcane Surge when you or your totems hit an enemy with a spell. And you get 20% spell damage increased as well from that. Why is it doing that? Okay. Rallying Cry, I like to use this on builds like this because the mana regen is a little bit low. And you're using Mind Over Matter. Like if I pull the mana regen up, as you can see, it's only 108. I believe that's accounting for the boots already. But still, it's not like a ton of mana. Luckily, the totems are very cheap. But it's not really a problem when you're running through the map or anything. It's more a problem like if you do take a big hit that dips into your mana. The recovery rate isn't that great. So you can either have this rolling all the time, or if you feel like it's too much of a pain in the ass, because it does give extra damage, keep in mind. But if you feel like it's too much of a pain in the ass, then just toss it up once your mana kind of gets depleted a little bit. Like you take a big hit, you know, you have a spare second, just cast your Rallying Cry. It really helps your mana regen out. Flammability. Incinerate is no longer a projectile, so inflammability is probably the best curse, especially considering it ignites. Elemental weakness is also fine. And shield charge, we get a Vol Haste, which is linked with the Immortal Call, cast on damage taken setup. You can also use, like you could theoretically use a Vol Disc, but I don't really think there's enough ES to make it that worth it. So just something to keep in mind there. And now I'll go into the tree here. So, alright, so I think how I built this before I got the Scion Uber Lab is you basically come up through here, through the mana, and go up this side. You can come up through the spell damage, but it's just like more points you have to respec, and you're not really going to finish there anyway. So I'd argue there's not really much of a point. But yeah, so you come up through there, and then eventually you just respec into this, where you start basically from Templar start, and then you also come down here and you get Totemic Zeal. And since you're close to Constitution, you just grab it. Thing about Totemic Zeal is that if you're not playing a Hierophant build, I feel like it's almost mandatory for the build to feel good, especially because we're not getting Totemic Mastery either down here, so there's not enough room for it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend Totemic Zeal. You're not getting this node anymore. It's pretty efficient, but it's projectile. Remember, Incinerate is now AoE. And I would definitely get the AoE clusters because you kind of want all the AoE you can get on this build, because it does feel a little bit... The AoE is not that great, but it is good enough to clear reasonably quickly. Like, when I was leveling this, especially through the ease levels, I was still getting, like, very high experience per hour, you know, like in the 300, 400 millions, stuff like that. But it's just leaves a little bit to be desired. And other than that, I think the routing is pretty intuitive. Stuff like this is good because it gives you like life regen and the max energy shield. And then obviously you want your mind over matter, trying to squeeze out all the health you can. Not really interested in power charges or anything, trying to pick up all your crit. Next thing I'd be doing is getting these nodes, I believe, which would put me at like 96. So then you could also get this free jewel socket as well, though. So there's a little bit more to be done. If you want more health, you can come down to the melding cluster, which is actually really good for hybrid builds. Now, thing about this build is, it's like, as you can see here, it's kind of a hybrid. I actually usually have discipline up, so it looks more like that. And the reason why is because you end up with like a leftover amount of ES, right? As you can see there, I'm not even using full ES gear, and just doing the normal pathing, not speccing into melding or something, I end up with, what was it, like 1300 ES. And it just kind of feels really bad because you're leeching to your life, obviously, because you have the Scion, or the Scion Ascendancy Chieftain here, which is 1% of damage dealt by your totem's leech to your life. But you have like this ES barrier that it just feels kind of useless, because what ends up happening is it always goes down, and then like it never kind of comes back up. And because this build doesn't freeze anything, it's not quite as good as like getting the build back up, or letting the ES charge back up. If you're doing a freezing pulse build and you have extra ES, it's not as big of a deal because you're actually freezing a ton of mobs, and the damage that gets through is very intermittent. So what'll happen is you'll take a chunk of damage, your ES will go down, but then as long as you're not using blood magic or anything like that, it'll actually go back up because you're mostly freezing a lot of mobs and you don't take a ton of damage consistently usually. The problem with this build is you are taking consistent damage, and your ES tends to stay down, so obviously that kind of leads you into thinking, oh, I want to take Ghost Reaver. Now the problem with Ghost Reaver is actually kind of twofold. So it's 2 points out of the way, which doesn't seem like a big deal at all, but this build is really already tight for points. And then on top of that, it bases your leech rate off of your ES, which is really bad, which is kind of why I threw Discipline in there to help it out a little bit. Because even with Discipline, though, it's like 400 something ES per second versus like 1,000 life per second if it were to just go on life and I would invest more into pure life. So yeah, it's just kind of rough, I guess. Kind of deciding what you want to do exactly with it. It's definitely a kind of like a weird thing. I think I'm going to remake a CI version of this. And if you go CI, then you most definitely have to go, what do you call it? You have to go Hierophant, basically, to get the 30% of mana as ES, to get a reasonable amount of ES. But if you're not doing that, then you're probably going to end up with some hybrid stats, and then you're just like, oh, should I take advantage of my ES being there? But, you know, you're lowering your leech rate. So it kind of depends on your playstyle, I guess. Like, if you're really trying to rely on the leech, then I would not go Ghost Reaver and try and get the most that you can out of leech by just building up your life pool. And your ES will just kind of be an extra layer that will sometimes be there, sometimes it won't be. But if you are trying to build up your... If you do want that more effective health, then yeah, you can grab Ghost Reaver and like leech a little bit to it, you know what I mean? I do kind of like it because basically it keeps your ES up while moving between packs and stuff like that, because it has like a over time effect with the leech, obviously, because it's not instant leech. So it's reasonably decent. I'm not entirely sure which version I'd prefer to play it. Yeah. And again, that's the main reason we're going Scion, though, is to get the leech. So I'd have to play the other version without it to really say, I guess, but I'm not like super impressed by this version, to be honest. So I may remake a version of this as a Hierophant and try out. If you go Hierophant, basically the nodes you want to take are the 2 totem nodes, and then you're probably going to take the power charge thing, since Incinerate now can crit, and the because it gives power and endurance charges, which actually give quite a bit of effective health, because it's 4% phys reduction per. And then on top of that, you're probably going to want to take the AoE cluster, actually, instead of taking, like, typically if you have a Life Hierophant build and you're taking the power charge node, then that means that you're taking the 2 totem nodes guaranteed and you're taking the power charge node, so you only have 2 points left, which means that you would take the Mind Over Matter typically, but in the like improved Mind Over Matter, but in this case you're probably going to want to actually take the Arcane Surge node, where it gives you like 40% more spell damage, but it's mostly for the area of effect, because this build can really use all the area of effect that you can get, pretty much. So, and 25% is actually quite a substantial amount. I would at least try it, see how it feels. If I didn't like it, I would go into the extra mana. So just something to keep in mind there. How's the damage on this? Well, that's the good thing. The damage is actually fucking insane. As you can see, it destroyed Red Elder in the video. I might post a video of it running maps, but it's not really a map running build. It doesn't clear terribly. I'll probably just post of it anyways, but it's not like not really meant to run maps, like speed run them at least. Like, obviously I got to like 92 relatively fast on this, but I wouldn't take this character really to 100 running maps, you know, and probably stop at 95 or something. 95, 96. But it does do a fuck ton of damage. Like, I think this basically sims at like 5 to 600k. So it's a massive amount of damage on a very small budget, especially considering you're only going to drop into like probably the 4 to 500k if you use a 5-link here. You don't need that good of a shield. A lot of these items are very cheap. My Scepter is not anything amazing. So, yeah. Just a very good build for doing a lot of single target damage. The thing is, there's a bit of a ramp, so I would say, like, it's not as good for, like, Adzuri in particular. Yeah, comparing it to, like, something like Mines or something like that, but for bosses like Elder, it's really great. I really like totems for things like Guardians and Elder Guardians, because they allow you to, like, freely dodge all the mechanics of the fight while your totems are still there doing damage. And a lot of times they'll have the time to ramp up. Obviously, there are certain bosses that, like Hydra, can kind of AoE clear your totems down, but for the most part, they do pretty good work. So I think that they're pretty nice. Another thing you can do just for stuff on the tree is you can actually come up and get Arcane Focus if you want more ES, or come down to here if you're doing the hybrid version. But yeah, so that's kind of that. And then for if you're going to do the CI version of Hierophant, you're obviously going to want to take the 30% gained as mana node, and then the totem nodes. That's going to eat up all your points there. And then you could do Chieftain, but unfortunately the thing, like, what initially piqued my interest in Chieftain was remembering the leech, like the leech to the totems themselves, because what'll end up happening with this is in really high-end incursions, because the totems take a bit to actually get their damage potential out, they can kind of get blown up by mobs a little bit, and it's not really a problem in maps. It's more of a problem in like really dense incursions, because everything's packed in. There's a lot of construct shooting from ranged, so it can be a little bit annoying there. And yeah, so it struggles, I'd say, like in the high end, so I was thinking, oh, maybe you could run a Chieftain version to kind of counteract that. But the problem is that they removed that bit, I think, when they changed the Chieftain Ascendancy. So now there's nothing that actually leeches to the totems themselves, it just leeches to you as health. So there's pretty much no reason to go Chieftain, because I think Ascendant is just better, because you get more skill points, you get an extra totem, and you basically get the Ash effect and the Leech effect, which are the main things that you're looking for. The only thing you're missing out on is like 10% Fire Pen, 8% reduced damage taken, and I guess 16% more damage. But I think that's easily weighed up for by all the stuff you get as Hyro. Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say, oh yeah, so you can actually run this with 2 Kahamas, which is cheap right now, and that'll get you 5 totems. You could actually run it with Hierophant and get 6 totems. Or you could run it with Ascendant here and get 5 totems. Now, if you run it with Ascendant and you build more into the life and you kind of shy away from the ES, you can actually get like probably 1200 to 1500 ES leech per second if you can get your health high enough, or life leech per second, because in 2 Kahamas itself gives you a huge chunk of life. That's like 100 life and then the base life on the shield. So 2 Kahama is definitely an interesting option. If you were to go that route, I would just take the Mind Over Matter and go into Eldritch Battery and put whatever ES you have left on your mana. But you're obviously going to be like probably losing effective health overall, but you're going to be gaining some effective health just via how quickly you leech, I guess. So it's something I'm going to try in the future. I'm probably going to make multiple variations of this build, but I'm just trying to get them all out there now, give you guys different ideas. You can try different things. And obviously you can use 2 Kahamas with the, what do you call it, the Hierophant. If you do that, you're just going to be squish, is the thing. But you're going to do a ton of fucking damage because you have 6 totems. So, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like, it is what it is there a little bit. If you want to be a damage whore, it's kind of the way to go. But I think it would be really interesting trying to make it work with the Leech from the Chieftain. And I think the Scion Chieftain is just better than the actual Chieftain. Now, about Volpact. So I've tried doing versions of this where you come down and get Volpact, and ultimately to me it just seems like it's too great of an investment of points for it to really be worth it. It'd be like one of those things where you'd probably technically have to try it and see how it feels, but intuitively I just don't get the sense that I want to try it anytime soon. I think, if anything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try the 2 Kahama version first, and do it with just stacking the life, see what I can get the leech threshold up to, and then just see if that feels good or not. If it really feels a lot to be desired, then doubling it might help. But yeah, I think for the most part, you just don't want to get Volpack because it's too much of an investment. Thing you have to keep in mind too is you actually get a decent amount of leech, or a decent amount of regen, and you're basically giving all of that up if you go VP. So yeah, you're getting like more instant leech, but you're also getting a lot of just life regeneration per second that goes on top of whatever you're leeching normally. So I don't think Volpact is worth it in this particular case. Just my 2 cents. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. For boot enchant you want pen. Lightning also works pretty well. You don't really want crit necessarily because you're trying to generate power charges with Orb of Storms, because this build doesn't have auto charge generation. If you were going Hierophant, then you could actually get the crit enchant on boots if you wanted. And what you would do is you would just put Arcane Surge on instead of like an Orb of Storm setup, you would put it on like a curse setup, and you just spam your curse really quick if you wanted to proc it. And that way you wouldn't have to crit anything, so you could still benefit from the totem crit on the boots. The thing is, like, the crit is almost never going to be the best enchant anyway, but it's just kind of annoying to run lab if you don't like running it. So like, I can understand like people keeping the crit enchant if they're going Hierophant, because their charge generation is already taken care of for them, you know, and they don't, because it's like, it's almost as much damage as the pen and the flat. So yeah, I understand why people keep it. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to leave them in the comments. And oh yeah, always run increased AoE for trash. You really need it. And just swap in conk for hard bosses. You don't need to swap in conk for, I would say, anything other than like I only swap it in for like high tier elder fights and stuff like that, or like Shaper Guardian, stuff like that. Shaper, like, that's the only time I really put conk in. I don't even really think you need it for like tier 15 bosses, but you can put it in if you want. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you for watching, and hope you liked it, and talk to you guys later.